Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So we could be able to do it from both ways. Okay. Um, let's start here. Okay. Well, first of all, uh, ladies and gentlemen, we're here with the great Hebrew Igbo scholar Remy Ilona. Dr. Remy Ilona, I'm not going to introduce him too much. I would like for him to explain to you all a bit of his work. I was introduced to Dr. Remy Ilona first through his book, The Hebrew Igbo Republics, which I was reading actually on my way back from America just a few months ago. And it was so astounding. The information that was there was so well found and researched. And it really gave a bunch of great perspectives that we didn't have beforehand, or at least I didn't have beforehand, especially on the connection of the Hebrew Igbo community tribe lineage to the house of Israel in the way that Remy introduced it in his book. And I couldn't resist the opportunity to have him on to speak to us a little bit about this information, especially um, in route of what's going on now in the world, especially with the awakening of the Hebrew Israelite communities in America and those who awaken to their Hebrew or Jewish lineage. And so I think Remy Ilona, Dr. Remy Ilona, is one of the most well-versed scholars on this subject, which obviously it'll be time now for us to hear from him in regards to this very important subject. So first of all, Dr. Ilona, thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you. And I'd like to hear a little bit from you. And you can explain a bit to the audience in regards to your work, in regards to your years of research into this very important topic, Hebrew Igbo culture.
Thank you very much, Brother Ashriel. When I referred to you, when I called you brother, I do so from many perspectives. One is that you look like a typical Igbo, so I do not have to, and my words are serious. Right down there in Africa, we can always know who is Igbo, who is this, who is that, and typically you look like one of us. You may run this through some other friends of yours. I hope that you and our colleagues, the other people that are listening, will be able to cope with my Igbo accent. Interestingly, my son has been in America for just 2 months, and I don't know how he managed to, what really happened, because a boy that has been here for 2 months can switch from the Nigerian accent. I wouldn't say he has a typical Igbo accent like myself. I would rather use the term Nigerian because I grew up in core Igbo land, but he has grown up in other parts of Nigeria that are not Igbo land. So I would say he has a Nigerian accent. But I noticed something 2 weeks ago. Effortlessly, he switches from the Nigerian accent to the American accent, and he speaks it flawlessly. Probably because he's just getting into his teens. You know, when people are so young, they can learn very fast. So I hope our colleagues will be able to cope with my Nigerian accent. I will get into this subject by first of all thanking you for conceiving it and inviting me, because as we said before we even started, there is a lot of wrong information out there. And some of this wrong information have existed for centuries. The most educated people in the world, we are forced with this wrong information. This is all they know. And they keep on perpetuating it in academia, in media. And it's time we begin to lay the axe to the root of this wrong information. Because we mustn't neglect the effects they have. If a people are people A and you tell them that they are people B, you have set them on the wrong course. It will be very, very difficult for those people to organize themselves. This very morning at my YouTube channel, somebody, obviously well-intentioned, asked a question, or rather made a statement. He said that he is convinced, or that he wants to believe, that Igbos belong to the lost tribes of Israel. For God's sake, Igbos don't belong to the lost tribes of Israel. Igbos are the lineal descendants of the biblical Israelites. Igbos are lineal descendants of the biblical Israelites. They're not lost tribes of Israel. Lost to who? Lost to who? But these are information that got into the mainstream, and of course, originally we cannot deny that the people that brought them up were racist. These lost tribes are always found in parts of the world that are deemed inferior. They are never found in the places where you find the groups that constructed themselves to be superior. And it is a given today that some people are even rejoicing when they say that they are lost tribes. Lost to who? I don't look at the point we are looking at. How can we call the Igbos a lost tribe of Israel when the word Igbo itself means Hebrew? How can we call the Igbos a lost tribe of Israel when the Igbo term for religion and culture is what the Israelites of the Bible, is the term that the Israelites of the Bible used for religion and culture? If the Igbos want to talk about religion and culture today, they will say our religion and culture is Omenana. The Israelites of the Bible understood their religion and culture to be called Omenana. The religion and culture you shall do in the land, in whatever language they used. If we go to, of course, we cannot say today as a verity that the Hebrew we know is the Hebrew that Moses used. But still, even in that Hebrew that we have today, which we can say with all level of assurance that it has shifted from the language that Moses used, but still there, what you would find the Israelites understanding their religion and culture to mean or to be is what you find the Igbos in 2023 understanding religion and culture to mean. So a group that is coming with all this information, how can we believe that they are lost? Members of the group themselves can believe they are lost because that is what everybody says. If everybody is calling you, if everybody in the world begins to call you John, 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 at a stage you will start repeating that you are John too. So I'm thanking you for providing this forum for us to begin to state things the way they should be stated, because this culture of lies being, not even lies, but confusion being perpetuated, I think it's high time we tackle it so that we would know exactly what is what and begin to work from that angle.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for that great introduction. And I want to ask you, Dr. Ilona, since we're already speaking about the Igbos, Hebrew Igbos, can you give us a very clear migration pattern of the Igbo Hebrew family migrating from northeastern Africa, Israel, and arriving to the western shores of West Africa? Is there any specific pattern where you could be able to show the migration routes of the Igbos?
Thank you. I will, first of all, I will start by making something highlighting something. If you call me Dr. Ilona, and I accept because I have a juris doctor. I'm a lawyer, doctors of jurisprudence. So if I accept, I'm accepting on that basis, but I'm still working on my PhD at present time. I'm working on my doctor of philosophy. But if you call me doctor, I would understand that you are calling me doctor because I have a doctors of jurisprudence as a lawyer.
Absolutely.
I'm called to practice law at the Supreme Court of Nigeria. And I practiced and taught it for so many years in Nigeria before proceeding to the United States. Okay, now to the question you raised. The migration routes of the ancient Hebrews from the land of Israel to what we call Igbo land now, that I prefer to call the Hebrew republics. Those routes have never been dormant. That road has never been dormant. To the diligent historian will notice that Hebrews continued to pass through, to migrate through that route up and down. I will make my point clearer. Israel is located in the place you call Northeast Africa. Granted, yeah, some people also say it is Middle East. Some people say it is Northeast Africa. But what we know is that it is Israel, or it was Israel. There is a route, or there are routes, but I'm talking about the one that I'm most familiar with. And I might even go beyond Israel and get to Iraq, Mesopotamia. Let me start from Mesopotamia. I know you must be familiar. I know you must be familiar with this study that I'm holding in my hands.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That was the second book that I read. My
DNA report, according to my heritage, you know, the way my heritage reports DNA is that it reports the clearest indication of where the genes of a person are found. So it reported that I started from what we would call Iraq today, Mesopotamia. And in Mesopotamia, you find Uru of the Chaldeans. And by the way, my homeland in what we may call Igbo land or the Hebrew republics today is in Uru Okwe. Uru Okwe. While Abraham was born in Uru of the Chaldeans. So there is a migration route, because we mustn't neglect that the Israelites did not start from what we call the land of Israel. They started from Uru of the Chaldeans. They started from Abraham in Uru of the Chaldeans. But God promised them that their basic land will be the one we know as the land of Israel. But when we are talking about their travels, it is best to start from what we call Iraq at present times. There is a very clear migration route all the way from that Iraq through the land of Israel to what we call Igbo land, and throughout the millenniums, throughout history, throughout centuries of histories, Hebrews continued to traverse that same route. I will give you a few instances of Hebrews traversing that route. Have you heard about the Songhai Empire? I'm talking about something that happened 500 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The Songhai Empire had a very large community of Hebrews. By the way, the boundaries of this empire that I'm talking about to you today, the frontiers extended into what you know as Nigeria. And the Igbos are in the country called Nigeria. That is where the Igbos are. So where did those Hebrews come from? Those Hebrews came from, originally, they came from Israel, passed through the desert, then settled in that very large empire until Askia Muhammad, the tyrant, ordered them to convert to Islam or to leave. In other words, what are we looking at now? We are looking at expulsion of Israelites who were not less in number than those expelled from Spain and Portugal. So we are looking at a migration route all the way from, we traced it from Ur of the Chaldeans, passed through the land of Israel, then, and we are looking at something that happened 400 years ago, all the way, because from that Songhai Empire, all you needed to do is to get into that river, to get on top of that river Niger, and you know the banks of the river Niger, where it is. It is in contemporary Igbo land today. So to get on that river, the river itself will carry you down all the way to the river Niger. And you know there are studies that noted that seed of Israel were found on that, those studies go back 370 years ago, that seed of Israel were found on the banks of that Niger. So what am I saying? The route through the desert is clear. And the Israelites kept on moving front and back through that route. At no time was that route dormant. But what happened was that historians did not think it was convenient. It was not convenient to really do a lot of hard work there, because if they did a lot of hard work there, what it would mean is that the people presently constructed as blacks, presently constructed as inferior, also played a role in sacred history. So it was just written out of history so that we will keep on perpetuating the falsehood. When we want to be charitable, we call them lost tribes of Israel. I repeat, for God's sake, lost to who?
So let me ask you this then. If you're saying that the migration patterns clearly show continual migration, not just from Israel, but also from Mesopotamia, from modern day Iraq, coming down throughout Israel, migrating on through the desert to the north, to the west coast of Africa, and then coming down the Niger River and arriving there in the area where it would be called today Igbo land or Biafra, however you want to refer to that. So in that case, then, if this information is clearly shown, and there are a lot of studies that are actually showing these migration patterns, why are the Igbos mainly not recognized, in your opinion, by the current Israeli establishment?
I think this elephant in the room deserves to be addressed, because the more we continue to ignore it, the more that the confusion, the longer the confusion exists, and is harmful to everybody. The Israeli authorities, unfortunately, don't know. When I talk about the Israeli authorities, I'm talking about the Israeli authorities since 1970. They do not know much about the Igbos.
Why specifically 1970?
Because before 1970, from 1960 to 1970, there was full diplomatic relations between the Igbos and the state of Israel.
That was important to mention.
And that is why one of the most ridiculous things I hear is that Igbos are lost tribes of Israel. Igbos are a reimagined Jewish community. A nation of 50 million people, a nation that has more PhD holders in America than every other ethnicity.
How
It's a
many
Jewish
people are there?
community. Huh?
How many people?
50 million people. Those that are still maintaining ties to Igbo land, because if you count the African Americans and Caribbeans that are Igbos, you are talking about a nation of over 100 million that has more PhD in the United States and the UK and every other ethnicity, that produce the third largest film industry in the world. And it just cannot be a Jewish community. No, that is not what it is. So the authorities in Israel, when Biafra collapsed, they faced other priorities. They stopped. The relationship between them and the Igbos fizzled out. So they do not know anything about the Igbos today. And the authorities on the Igbo side faced other priorities, because recognition should go both ways. Recognition should go both ways. The Israeli authorities don't have a prerogative to recognize the Igbos, and just that. The Igbos also have a prerogative to recognize Jews. There is nowhere it is stated in the Torah that for and anybody to be an Israelite, a particular person has to recognize him. What I see in the Torah is Israelites coming together, as Joseph and the brothers came together. So we also play a very strong game when we cede to a particular group of people the authority to recognize others. What we've done is to simply hand them a power they shouldn't have. So what we do is to come together as one people. And I will say that that process began in 2022, when the Obadiah Alliance acknowledged that the Igbos are linear descendants of the Israelites. And the Igbos themselves acknowledged them, the Sephardic organization, as their brothers. So it's essentially a question or a matter of not having information and not having interest. Because remember, nations have priorities. It's not a priority today for the state of Israel to work with the Igbos. And I would say, unfortunately, it is not a priority for Igbo leadership too. But the Igbo leadership and the Jewish leadership in the state of Israel before 1970 thought it was important. So what is happening today is that Omen and the Defenders, a very important Igbo group, which I happen to be a member of, and the Obadiah Alliance and some Jewish groups, think it's important. So these groups are working. But the primary leadership of both groups are not interested. And that is fine too.
So can you explain a bit about the Omanana? Because I know, I mean, if we're saying that there are 50 million people, and then in addition to 50 million, if we're talking about those in North America and those in the Caribbean Isles, and we're going to get to those also in America and the Caribbean Isles, but can you explain a little bit more about what is Omanana, and then can you tie it into some of the practices that we know to be ancient Hebrew Israelite practices that are still being practiced and have been practiced by the Igbos throughout the history?
In that case, it is better for me then to mention practices of the Israelites, practices of the Hebrews, which only the Igbos retained. Do you get the point I'm making? I said, absolutely. In that case, it is important for me to start by the practices of Israelites, which only the Igbos understand today. And I'm not coming from I'm not coming from a position of supremacy. I don't believe in supremacy. I simply believe that Igbos retain them because of the circumstances of the Igbos.
Okay. So can you share some of those practices with us that are still being kept today?
Okay, I will share them now. I will start from looking at even the Hebrew a Hebrew idiom. A Hebrew idiom. When the writers are now shifting beyond, I'm shifting to the Semites and the Hebrews, because Abraham was a Hebrew, but he was a Semite.
Okay.
The writers of the Hebrew Bible, when they were telling us the story of the origins of Abraham, they told us that Abraham came from a particular man who was called Terah, who had 3 sons. The names of the sons were Haran, Abram. I can't place the name of the 3rd son now, but Haran was the father of Lot. Haran was the father of Lot, and Abraham was his brother. This narrative makes a statement which is basically, on the face of it, without meaning. It says, Haran died in the face of the father. I looked at 50 translations of 50 commentaries on the Hebrew Bible. No commentator understood what this simple statement meant, that Haran died in the face of the father. The only way to understand what the Hebrews who wrote the Hebrew Bible meant was by examining that same statement in Omenana. Without understanding what that statement means to the Igbos, you will read Genesis all through your life. You will keep on reading Haran died in the face of the father without knowing that the writers of the Bible they simply summarized a very profound tradition that is still alive in the Igbo community today. In other words, what are we saying? To understand that statement, you must understand the Omenana. And I'll tell you what they summed up in that phrase, because they assumed that the people they were writing for were familiar with the culture. When an Igbo man dies while the father is still alive, I repeat, when an Igbo man dies, when the father or while the father is still alive, the Igbos say he died in the face of the father. The exact words used in the Quran is exact words that the Igbos use. Onwuru n'ihu nna ya, ihu is face. Onwuru n'ihu nna ya, he died in the face of the father. And it has serious implications. The implication is that if he is the first son, his lineage, that guy that died, loses the right. His lineage loses the right to remain the first son of the family. And I believe that Abraham succeeded. Abraham, there is so much going on that the narrators of the Torah only summed up, because they assumed, they must have believed that the people they were writing this for will be very familiar with what they were writing. I believe that Abraham succeeded to that priesthood because Haran died in the face of the father. That choice of Abraham, because God does not work in a vacuum. God selected Abraham and left no room in doubt that he would be the head, because the guy that was supposed to be the head died in the face of the father. And the tradition is that if a person dies in the face of the father, a Semitic tradition, which is still alive in the Igbo, in Omenana today, If the guy that is supposed to be that priest, or to succeed the father as a priest, dies while in the face of the father, he loses that right of first son. Because remember, in Semitic tradition and in Igbo tradition, the first son is the priest. Once the father goes, he succeeds him as priest. So what have we done now? We started from a tradition of the Hebrews that is still alive only among the Igbos today. So why would an informed Igbo be very happy to learn that he belongs to the lost tribe of Israel? Okay, let's talk about another one. No informed Igbo. When I say informed, I know what I mean, because I know, just like most people in the world today, most Igbos are not into rigorous exercises like studies. So they may not know what they are seeing every day. They may be seeing it every day, but they may not know. And it's not unique to them. Every society in this world, without exception, people are afraid of studying. You don't need DNA studies to know who is a Levite among the Igbos. You don't need DNA studies because the Levitic communities among the Igbos still exist exactly the way Moses told the Israelites that they would be existing. The Levites among the Igbos do exactly what the Levites did in biblical Israel. They are still doing it in 2023.
Can you give a few examples for that?
If an Igbo takes his life by hanging himself, that is committing suicide, his body is profane. He has committed an abomination. He cannot receive normal, formal burial. This is still retained in the Jewish Beta Israel communities. They bury the person that committed suicide outside their cemeteries. In the Igbo case, the body will be thrown away. But before that process is done, a Levite must come, carry out purifications among the Igbos before that body can be touched. It is still Igbo culture till today. The Levites are still doing it till today. Unfortunately, in 1959, the greatest novelist to come out of Africa, Chinua Achebe, wrote it down because he knew, or rather, it was as if he knew that there would be a time when people that were mischievous will begin to claim that Igbos are saying that they are Israelites in order to migrate to the state of Israel. In 1959, just like Olaudah Equiano wrote about Passover, Pesach in Igbo culture 200 years ago. So Olaudah Equiano was saying that was talking about Passover 200 years ago in Igbo culture because he wanted to migrate to Israel in 1948. I laugh like Kofi Olomide. I just gave you instances of 2 or 3. Or rather, I give you 3, the Levites, and then how the Igbos deal with the suicide, and gave you parallels in Beta Israel culture and Jewish culture. And then how about the Netinim? The Netinim exist only among the Igbos today. Who are the Netinim? They are the Osu. When we talk about ancient Israelite worship, everybody remembers only the temple in Jerusalem. For God's sake, that's not the only place the Israelites worshipped God. Shiloh, where the great Samuel, in some ways, the logical successor of Moses. Joshua succeeded Moses, we know that, but the person that wielded all that, or every kind of authority, well, let us not get into legalisms now. We know Samuel, where he succeeded Eli, Shiloh. That was a center of worship in Israel. But when we talk about Israelite worship today, who do we remember? I'm talking about Israelites. I'm very careful with my words. When I say Hebrew, I have a reason. When I say Semites, I have a reason. When I say Israelites, I have a reason. When
Can you give a description of the difference between all the three? Because, and the reason why I say that is because a few of them have been conflated today. You see, the usage of Hebrew or Jew or Israelite it's been kind of a conflated usage of this word as if they all mean the same thing. And when you speak to, for example, the average person who considers himself a Jew, he would say that this the changing of the word was simply because from generation to generation there was the meaning remains the same, but they just referred to this body of people in different ways along the different in the different years in our history. But we know that all three of these words are referring to three different bodies of people where they cannot be conflated and added as if they're just one people. Can you just kind of give a definition for what is a Hebrew, what is an Israelite, and what is a Semite?
Abraham and his family were Semites, Abraham became the ancestor of the Hebrews. The Hebrews were Isaac and Jacob. The Israelites were the children of Jacob, that is Israel. The Jews are simply descendants of Israelites. That complete these four categories are not identical. They have different in very, very significant ways. They even have different cultures.
Okay, so you can't conflate these things. A Hebrew
they
is not
conflated. People conflate them because of what I just told you. Most people in the world are not engaged in rigorous studies. So back to what I was telling you about Shiloh. It wasn't only the priests and the Levites that were in that temple. There were other people working as auxiliary priests in that temple. And that community is alive today, as far as I know, only in the Igbo community. The Talmud calls them Netinim, the Igbos call them Osu. I will use the Bible to tell you who they were, their origins, and what God said they should do, which they are still doing among the Igbos today. Remember Joshua's experience with the Gibeonites. The people of Gibeon who fooled Joshua, and he turned them into hewers of wood and drawers of water in the house of his God. Remember, there was no Solomon's temple then. He said to draw water and hew wood in the house of my God. And then he went further, the condition for their becoming a part of Israel was to avoid war. They fooled Joshua because they didn't want to fight Israel. So they were granted immunity. This is a condition. I mean, this is a group that got into priestly services in Israel. Even though they were foreigners, but they became part of Israel. Good. But there were Israelites who also became part of this group. You remember Joab, David's
absolutely.
When Solomon went after him, he wanted to join this community. He ran into the temple, but Solomon ordered that he should be brought out because Solomon did not want him to benefit. Because he was not guilty of manslaughter, he was guilty of murder. He killed a soldier inadvertently. Advertently. So Solomon ordered him dragged out. But if Solomon had not ordered him dragged out, he would have joined this particular people. Because the Israelite law was that once somebody enters that place of worship, grabs the horns of the altar, the person is immune from attack. And you know the funny thing? Probably up to nearly 1 million Igbos belong to this category today. So my question is again is the people who retain these treasures of biblical Israel, what makes them lost tribes of Israel? Why should they be called lost tribes? When only among them would you find things you find nowhere else? I'm telling you that up to 1 million Igbos belong to this category today.
I think the lost tribes idea is actually coming from a Eurocentric ideology that the only people who have any connection to Israel are those people who came, majority of them came from Europe. And then they built a milieu and determined that this is how things are going to go. And so everyone or anyone who subscribes now to these tenets, we could be able to recognize them as part of us, or they'll have to go through a conversion procedure so that they can be welcomed into our home. And so that's why today there's this false narrative that 80 to 90% of Israelites or Jews are from the Ashkenazi lineage, which evidently, if we're talking about there are 50 million Igbo Jews, then that cancels that out automatically. But you had mentioned just not too long ago that we have to deal with the elephant in the room. And that elephant in the room, we know, and this is what I read from your book, is simply that idea of perpetrating the white supremacist ideology that Black people cannot belong to such a distinguished group of people that have been ordained by God, because we are a lesser people. And I would like for you to deal with that a little bit, Remy, if you don't mind. Where did that idea come from that Black people cannot be from the house of Israel? And why do you think today they're trying so hard to suppress that idea when we see that it is continuing to spring up and continue to develop?
I will say as much as I know at this moment. I would say that at every point in history, humans have been looking for ways to suppress other humans. And people have not always been vigilant, because when people are vigilant enough, they would nip such misbehaviors in the bud. So I am of the view, I'm not dealing with strict history now because I have not really surveyed the very origins of racism enough. But what I am thinking is that after Europe gained ascendancy after the Industrial Revolution, after it gained ascendancy after the Industrial Revolution, people forged in Europe. And by the way, there is a reason for that Industrial Revolution and lack of a parallel in Africa. Let us lance the boil. Let us deal with the elephant in the room by not obscuring of obfuscating anything. Because I see what we are doing, I see what you've brought up as an opportunity for us to start rebuilding. So when Europe, after all its destructive wars, was able to come up with the Industrial Revolution, acquired very, very serious weapons of war and every other thing, some Europeans began to imagine that they are superior to other people who do not look like them physically. and the Arabs and the Turks, who also is the contemporary Arabs and the Turks, because I do not know if the original Arabs and the Turks look like the present Arabs and the Turks, also picked up this idea and began to deride and look down on peoples that are darker than them. But then I am also interested in why a parallel industrial revolution did not take place in Africa. And I think we have to factor in climatic factors. The tropics have not challenged people enough. I have lived in West Africa and I have now lived in North America for some time. I think that the summers of the 12-month summers in sub-Saharan Africa created a lot of lethargy. It created a lot of lethargy. And because people became lethargic, people stopped being vigilant. And people that have predatory instincts, people that were imperial minded, simply constructed narratives that placed them at the top, placed some other people at the bottom, and over time, this became culture. And even though the Israelite identity was not one of the favored identities in the West, it was still subaltern. But since it was associated with people from Israel who were Europeans, but nevertheless an oppressed minority, why would it be extended to people who were considered even lower? I mean, the black people. You could see the whole thing still in even how the Israelite people have related with themselves. When Professor Daniel Lees published his book, Jewish Identity Among the Igbo of Nigeria, he's an academic professor at the University of his university in Switzerland and Tel Aviv, wondered why the Ethiopian Jews should be recognized by Israel and the Igbo should not be recognized. It's basically a good question, but the question should be, why would the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim be recognized as Israelites and the Igbos and the Beta Israel will not be? Or why would these two groups, why would the Igbos not recognize the Ashkenazim and Sephardim? But back to what the professor raised, it's easier for people who want convenience to view the Ethiopian as closer to white than the Igbo. Yeah, it's easier. It's very much easier. When I say we have to
Why is it
look
easier?
at the elephant in the room.
Why do you say it's easier for them to recognize the Beta Israel as closer to white as opposed to the Igbo?
Okay, I will explain now. One, Ethiopia is separated from the Arab world just by a narrow body of water. Two, remember, when we say white and black, these are constructions. Because I know Igbos that are lighter skinned than some people in Spain and Portugal and Italy. But these are constructions. So, who are the people that Europeans saw being led in chains to North America and Europe? The people you have degraded. You do not want to attribute anything sublime or pristine or wonderful to them. Because when we even talk about white and black, Nigerians did not see Igbos as blacks. In 1966, how they identified who was Igbo during the pogroms was anybody that was light-skinned. So these are relative terms. essentially constructed. They are not real. I'm even looking at if you say that some people are lighter skinned than others, I will accept that. But if you tell me that somebody is white, as a lawyer that I am, I could start a whole case that you may not be able to get out of, because you have to prove to me that you have found anybody that has this color.
Mm.
And I'm sure you will not be able to find such a person.
I see. Now let me ask you this, because I mean, as you're going along, so many things are coming to mind where it's so interesting to hear a lot of the things that you actually wrote in your book actually, coming from you, and listening to how you're actually, articulating this information. You could tell that it's really bound inside of you, and it's just not something that you have been studying just for the sake of being able to feed your mind, but it's because you actually recognize that this is your identity. And so I would like to go a little bit further, because I also read in your book where you were speaking about the fact that Hebrew Israelites in America who recognize themselves as part of the house of Israel, and many of them may trace their lineage back to the Igbos in West Africa. And we know that approximately 20% of those who were taken as slaves during the transatlantic slave trade in the 15th century, they actually were Igbos. And so a lot of those people who today are now beginning to reconnect their lineage back to the ancient Hebrew Israelites, but going through the lineage of the Igbos, they're not recognizing. As a matter of fact, it's sort of like a laughing stock, and we see it today happening live and living color, where there are people who are saying, and I'm not getting into the to the separation aspect of it. Some people are saying the real Jews, the fake Jews, the whatever. I'm not getting into that, but I would like to hear from you as to, are there some truth to the fact that these uh, descendants of slaves say that they could trace their lineage back to the Igbos? And then we also know that Igbos are able to trace their lineage all the way back to Mesopotamia, starting with Abraham and coming down and over into Igbo land. And so, can you just kind of shed some light on that aspect? Is there some truth to what Hebrew Israelites are claiming today?
As lawyers, we would say that it is self-evident, and I believe I was the person who made the strongest case that the African Americans and Caribbeans of Israelite descent who came from the Igbos, a good number of them knew who they were. They knew they were Israelites. They knew they were Igbos. They may not have written them down perfectly or articulated them perfectly, but one of the greatest injustices people have done to people is to fabricate the claim that they were simply making up those fabricate the falsehood that they were simply making up those claims. Was Olaude Equiano not one of them? Did he not spend so many years in the US, in the American colonies, and he remembered the Passover in his homeland, Igbo land? So why would we now convince ourselves that those people did not know who they were? What I'm trying to say is that the early Hebrew Israelites of Israelite stock, those that came from the Igbos, there was a very, very great chance that they knew who they were, and they left traces that they knew. If Olaude Equiano remembered everything that he wrote down, including the Passover, so why would I believe that Crowdy did not know that he was an Israelite?
Mm.
Why did he not start claiming that he was an Englishman?
A lot of people say to the, go ahead. The third book that I read.
Why did Crowdy not say he was English or Irish? Why did he say he was Israelite? And for people like us that know this culture, that are looking outside the box, a lot of things that people like Crowdy, a lot of the arguments that people like Crowdy, Ben Ami presented, if you read between the lines, you would see that these are people that remembered some aspects of Omenan. But it doesn't fit the favored narrative if people look critically before condemning whatever they did. Because I also believe that the people passing judgments did not know much about Israelite culture. The people that write off whatever people like this say themselves did not really know Israelite culture. But because some of them are in positions of authority, we assume they knew. So how can they discuss what they did not really know? It's just like no matter how well trained a person is, if the person has not studied Omenana, how will the person know what he died in the face of the Father means? No matter how brilliant I am, I cannot walk into an operating theater and deliver a woman of a child because I didn't study medicine. So that is for the the African American Caribbean position of some that we are Israelites. I know from the facts, from history, that some of them retained enough to know who they were and that they left traces that they did. It seems like you are not familiar that Olaude Equiano was in the colonies. He was there. And if there was one, why wouldn't there be two? Why wouldn't there be three? Why wouldn't there be four? Why wouldn't there be a Crowdy? I'm talking of sound as Crowdy.
William Salvas Crowdy. One of the things that are being mentioned, though, Doctor, is that Hebrew Israelites, or Black, how they like to refer to them as the descendant of slaves, because they experienced 400 years of slavery in America. And during this 400 years of slavery, they were totally stripped of their identity. And they had no idea after so many generations who they actually were. And so they read into the story of the Exodus that is attributed to European Jews. They read themselves into that story because of what they were experiencing in America as slaves. And that idea of an exodus out of slavery resonated with them because they were slaves. And so that was something that they were able to relate to. And so what they're doing simply is that they are appropriating the Jewish culture and taking it to themselves because they have no identity for themselves. So they're just appropriating someone else's identity and taking it to themselves. How would you respond to something like that?
It is very, very easy for somebody who has not done the work to accept this very simple but wrong summary of what happened. So many things happened. It's just not, we just can't simplify. We just can't write it, the African American experience of by simply attributing the African American and in some cases Caribbean Israelite identity with this. Then why didn't the Yoruba religion in Haiti, why did it not claim to be Israelite? Why didn't Voodoo claim to be Israelite? Why didn't Candomblé in Brazil, Santeria, also a religion of ex-slaves, why did they not claim to be Israelite religions? If suffering alone made the African Americans and Caribbeans that say we are Israelites to say it, to internalize it and appropriate that identity, why didn't everybody that went through the same experience. Why? They also were Christians. Remember, Haitians were Catholics. They also read the Bible. Why did they go the voodoo way and not the Israelite way? It is still, what we are seeing is still a product of racism and a product of people not doing due diligence before they begin to form opinions. Why would I for a moment believe that okay, my question is still on the table. How did Olaude Equiano remember what he wrote down? Until somebody tells me, because I had to read that book again. I read it for the first time when I was in high school. I decided to read it last month again, and what struck me like a blow on the face was he even talked about Passover.
Mm.
You see, it will take a very long time for humanity to realize that the best way is that there is enough for all of us to share. There is no point in struggling to disinherit, to delegitimize others. But man is constructed that way to always look for a way to place other people at a disadvantage. That is why people don't even bother to do proper research before they rush to the press. You remember the Igbo experience. Some 5 years ago, a group left America, went to Nigeria, collected some samples of some people under the guise that they were looking to see if Igbo DNA matches the DNA of Israelites. My brother, for God's sake, the Israelites left history 3,000 years ago. These guys returned to America, compared the samples they got from Nigerians. We are not even sure if they were Igbos. Compared those samples to the specimen of some Jews who were still alive in 2017. When they did not match, they said that it shows that Igbos were not Israelites. In other words, those Jews that were alive in 2017 were the Israelites that existed 3,000 years ago. I don't know if I'm making sense to you.
Absolutely.
To them, to those people, the Jews alive in 2017 were automatically Moses. But the Igbos, because they had already made up their minds that black people cannot be Israelites.
Mm. So it's basically a racist thing then.
Racist. And the newspaper celebrated it. People disappointed me. The newspapers, even in Israel, celebrated this abomination. But these same newspapers, I'm aware that they know that last year, the Sephardic Jewish Bedin proved that Igbos are linear descendants of the Israelites. No newspaper everywhere has written about it, because this does not put the Igbos down. If it's something that puts the Igbos down, every newspaper in Israel, America, Nigeria will write it.
My opinion on it, Doctor, is that I believe that the rabbinate and those who are in control of the rabbinate today and in control of those institutions that have the ability to be able to sit as the watchdogs or the gatekeepers and to determine who is and who isn't, they're afraid to lose the hegemonic control that they have held for such a long period of time by perpetrating the idea that 90%, 80 to 90% of Jews or of those who have any type of lineage to the ancient Israelites are actually Europeans. And so once they identify Igbos as part of the house of Israel, then they then will have to also identify the fact that a significant amount of those Igbo descendants went into America and into the Isles of the Sea and to South America as slaves. And so that means that a significant amount of those people also have their connection to Israel. And so that hegemonic control is automatically dissolved. And so then they would have to identify us as being from the highway of the seed of Abraham, considering the fact that you said that a significant amount of us in the migration had continued. It wasn't just a one-stop shop that they migrated and arrived to West Africa, but it was a continual, migration pattern. And we also know that even, during the Assyrian takeover of the north, the northern tribes, the northern Israel tribes in 722, a significant amount of them, and this is what I learned from your book as well, migrated or fled to North Africa.
Even from Judah itself.
Even from Judah.
Even from Judah. I didn't even know we would get to that. When people say that there are Jews mean Judah, and the others are lost tribes of Israel, for God's sake, laugh out loud that people will say. There are tens of Igbo clans that descended from Judah. They still bear the name Uda. They still bear the name Uda. So, but you see, if we are thinking in terms of hegemony, it demonstrates how far we have departed from the tradition. There is enough on the table for everybody to partake. Israel was designed by God to be egalitarian. Nobody's supposed to be any gatekeeper. Remember, after one session with the elders of Israel, the elders began to prophesy. Some elders began to prophesy, 4 elders, in fact. And Joshua ran to Moses and said, they are prophesying. Moses said, would God that all Israel become prophets? But I will repeat my stance. People should be vigilant. People should be vigilant. I don't know why I would need somebody to authenticate me as an Israelite or to validate me when I already know who I am. My society was devastated by colonialism, Christianization. My responsibility is to rebuild it. I can prove with facts and figures that Israelites built a very successful republic or a very successful federation of republics in West Africa that lasted over 500 years. God knows that at different times in history, his people would live outside the land of Israel. And living in the land of Israel does not grant them special immunity. If they sin, they will get thrown off the land. My ancestors got thrown off the land, so I'm talking from experience. The most important thing is wherever we find ourselves, let us live like Israelites. Let us build Israelite communities. Let us live by the Torah, which fortunately we have Omenana to bring alive to us now. Because without Omenana, we cannot really practice that Torah. I'm being honest with you. And whatever we come up with as replacements for the traditions in Omenana and Torah, they are not still the original. Ideal Israel was built on those traditions we find. Ideal Israel was built on those traditions we find in the first 5 books of the Bible. Everything after that is just something we would use while working to get back to the ideal. Isaiah did not talk about the laws Isaiah was talking about. The laws he said that we would all go to the mount of the Lord to listen to are those laws found in Genesis to Deuteronomy, not the laws found after them. Everything after them is just cut and nail, makeshift, management.
I think that's a point. Uh, I, I can't help but call you Dr. Remy Ilona
Thank you.
because of the information that you're sharing is so very vital. Not just for you and for other Hebrews, but also for our generation. I'm 31 years of age, and I've really, for the last, I would say, probably 10 years, have been researching into all of the information, looking for details, looking for information so that I can be able to also authenticate a lot of the things that I've been taught, not only from a, I would say, a biblical perspective, but also be able to add on the historical analysis to that so that we could be able to see where the highway of the seed then arrived today so that we can be able to then feel very comfortable in stating very clearly our identity as Hebrews, as Israelites, as Judeans who returned back to Israel to establish a community here. And like you said, wherever you are, you should be found trying to live in accordance with the biblical Torah tenets that then, will authenticate you as a child of this great, civilization, which is the Hebraic civilization. And so I really want to thank you, Doctor, for coming on, for speaking with me. I hope this is not going to be the last time because I understand now how much more we have to speak, how much more we have to talk, because this information has to get to the masses of people. They have to hear it. And then I think that the more information that is being shared, that will automatically cast out the disinformation that is being shared or the misinformation that is purposely being perpetrated in order to be able to divert people from actually being able to consume the correct information and then conclude who they are, what they are, and what is the truth in accordance with that. So I will allow you just a few closing comments, but I just want to thank you so much for taking out from your busy schedule and getting on and speaking to me.
I'll repeat what I started off with. What you conceived of, and by the way, this is what I tell whoever that conceives of these sessions like this, is extremely good. The world is in the shape it is because much of the information available to people is, when they are not patently false, they are misinformation. But as you said, when the right information gets out, we have more goodness in the world. So thank you for creating this opportunity for us to talk. Even if there are people that oppose what we are doing from the family, we have to keep on drawing them back. We have to go back to the traditions found in Torah, which I repeat, Omenana is bringing back alive. Ideal Israel is the one we find in the Torah, not anywhere else. So thank you for creating this opportunity for us to talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and have a good evening for yourself.
My best to our brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Let me
Thank you.
just, I'll stop the recording. Okay, have you stopped the recording on your end?
Okay, I will stop.